Greetings, Eric, and a very warm welcome to this podcast today. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm pleased to invite Eric Soulheim, an illustrious figure, a politician, an environmental activist, a peace builder. He is multifaceted as an individual, and I've known him for many, many years. I was working in the Red Cross when he was the chair of the OECD DAC. He's been a minister for international development. He's for many, many years. He's been a minister for the environment and someone who's really been working tirelessly to advance the environmental agenda. So Eric, it's such a pleasure to have you here today with us. Eric, you've also been an Under-Secretary General of the UN Environment Programme, where you really pushed hard to make sure that the world continues to stay focused on the whole environmental agenda, making sure that the Paris Agreement flourishes. But we've seen many, many setbacks, many obstacles that have come in the way. But having said that, Eric, there must be something in your childhood which perhaps spurred this interest. Tell us.
I think what really brought me to the issue of the environment was my childhood up in the Norwegian mountains. Look, those days no Norwegian could afford to go abroad for holiday. We went up in the mountains where we were chasing the cows and the sheep, and I had my favorite cow, which I had a lot of cozy time with. And then there was of course also foxes and moose and wild animals, and enormous beauty there. Well, later of course I've seen that it may be more beautiful in Guangxi or China, or in the African areas with elephants and tigers or many other parts of the world. But for me this was a fantastically beautiful place, my place, where I learned to cherish Mother Nature.
And so when you were doing those things in the mountains, I mean, what was the next step? I mean, what did you do? You finished school and came to college, and what spurred you into politics?
I got into politics with an interest at the time of the Vietnam War, which of course was one of the most unfortunate and crazy wars in human history. I mean, the end result after 20 years of war was exactly what would have happened without war. The Vietnamese nationalists or communists led by Ho Chi Minh, they would have won in the 1950s, they won at the end. Why waste 3 million lives on such a horrible, misjudged war? So that interest got me into politics, but also the wider interest in environment and the suffering of poor people in the world. There was an exhibition in Oslo where we are maybe 15 years old, and we saw that exhibition and tried to understand a little bit of the world. My friend stopped smoking after that because he thought he should do something for poor people, and I didn't smoke, so I stopped eating chocolate or sweets.
Oh, really?
In solidarity with poor people in Africa. Of course it had no effect, but it was what young
an act
people
of solidarity.
do. Exactly.
Yeah. So Eric, given that we're seeing that the entire climate agenda is really being torn apart. I mean, the progress that we had made with the Paris Agreement. In fact, I was recently at an event where the former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon spoke, and he spoke glowingly about President Xi Jinping and President Obama in 2016 when they came together in Hangzhou for a discussion to make sure that the Paris Climate Agreement goes through. And today we are seeing that there are member states who are pulling back. What do you think could be done to keep the climate agenda on track?
And what makes me enormously optimistic, I'm not pessimist on behalf of the environment, I'm very optimistic. Look, in May month this year, China added 100 gigawatt of solar energy to the grid.
Wow.
How much is that? Well, one example is 4 times the entire electricity in Bangladesh, a nation of 180 million people. It's 3 times as much as all the hydropower we have ever made in my home country of Norway. And we are completely dependent on hydropower. So this is enormous. It's a mind-boggling, world-changing, and China is now the indispensable nation for the green transition. There's also a lot of progress in India and other places, but China is the lead.
So since you're speaking about China, so let's take the Belt and Road Initiative. And I know that you are very much involved in the green BRI project. What is it all about, and what does it entail?
It's all about solidarity. Of course, it's also about Chinese power and Chinese economic interest, because Chinese companies cannot win in isolation. This is exactly the same as the United States of America did after the Second World War, when they launched the Marshall Help to help Europe. Yes, it was solidarity with Europe, but it was also the enlightened self-interest of the United States. American companies need markets and they need partners. China needs markets, it needs partners, but they also want to help. Let me give one example. I lived for a few years in Kenya. If you go through the city at the coast there, Mombasa, it's sorry to say, it's quite run down, lot of garbage and fairly poor. Then, all of a sudden, there is a green upmarket, fantastic thing, and that is the rail station for the China-built Mombasa-Nairobi Railroad. Complete change and showcasing to the people of Mombasa the future of Mombasa. I'm very sure in 50 years' time, all of Mombasa will be like that rail station is now, but it's showing the future.
Oh, well, that I'll agree with. We were in Kenya at the same time. Not only have I seen what the SGR, the standard gauge railway from Nairobi to Mombasa did, it just telescoped the amount of time you spent on the road trying to get there, and the free movement of goods, services and people really transformed it. But the other one was the expressway that they actually built from the Jomo Kenyatta Airport, connecting it to downtown. If you recall, getting out of the Jomo Kenyatta Airport, it could take us anywhere from 2 to 3 hours because of the traffic. And now in 25 minutes, you can actually be at the United Nations offices in Gigiri.
Wherever I go in the developing world, I see so many examples of how China has helped making infrastructure. You said roads in Kenya. Well, exactly the same in Colombo. I was involved in the peace process in Sri Lanka at the time of the peace process. Normally it took about 2 hours from Colombo to the airport. Now, 30 minutes, China built roads. China, Laos, railroads in Indonesia, railroad in Ethiopia, electric cars, investment, solar panels, wind, all this. China is now the main driver of the green transformation of the world, and Belt and Road is the main global investment scheme. 150 nations in the world have voluntarily joined Belt and Road. I mean, some people in the West can only find difficulties with it or faults with it. Well, why would every nation in Africa except one, and basically all of Latin America, embrace this if they didn't see benefits?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that I can agree with. Having spent half my career in Africa, I've seen the real effect and the benefits of the Belt and Road Initiative. In fact, I even recall that from the port of Lamu, they built a road all the way that crosses through northern Kenya in Moyale, all the way to Addis. And that really transformed lives and livelihoods. But
if I may add, my real hope is that this railroad from Mombasa to Nairobi can continue to Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, maybe even to South Sudan. We completely transform the region, because these landlocked nations will be linked to port. They can export and trade, and that is the uplifting of the people.
And in any case, if we want to see a future Africa continental free trade area, the only way that's going to be happening is through physical and digital infrastructure.
Exactly.
And this is where, coming back to, I have said frequently, I recently spoke at a Princeton China Forum, which is my alma mater, Princeton University, and prior to that at Yale, about the importance of the US-China collaboration on the climate agenda. Because these two countries can save the world. I actually wrote an article about it. It is the most consequential relationship of the 21st century. But ultimately, it's about converging interests. What can happen? What do you think can happen now if we can really get the US and China to really collaborate and have that transformative leadership? Their leadership will be consequential, because this is where is the reservoir of technology, of human capital, of the resources. I mean, of the greatest innovations that are taking place are happening in these two countries. I think there's a lot of money to be made also from it. I mean, if we were to look at just the climate agenda and the green transition by itself, what could be a message you could put out there, Eric, in getting them together?
Look, every major issue over time is much more easy to resolve if we work together, and particularly if the United States and China work together. Let's mention them: climate change, environment protection, bringing everyone out of poverty, providing education for everyone in the world, avoiding future pandemics, restarting the economies after the COVID, please mention one issue which is easy to resolve with isolation.
True.
I think every people in the world understand that deep down in their stomachs and their hearts.
Yeah.
We need to work together. Wars in Ukraine, in Gaza, in Sudan, in Myanmar, are they easy to resolve if we work together?
True.
Or are they easy to resolve if we have a global confrontation?
True.
We must avoid a global confrontation, particularly between China and the US, with all our means.
Yeah.
And the starting point for that is respect.
Yeah.
China will not adopt the political system of America,
Yeah.
but America will not adopt the political system of China either.
Yeah.
But there is no reason why we cannot respect each other and work together and have a dialogue, maybe sometimes protracted, long dialogue when we disagree.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, this year, Eric, as you know, is the 80th year of the United Nations.
Mm.
And I have to say, having spent 29 years in the UN, multilateralism is in crisis. It's in real crisis.
Mm.
And in fact, this is the first time, I would say, post the Second World War, we are seeing an interlocking crisis, a health crisis, which had a great impact on human health systems, and impacted our economies. We have a crisis of the climate, which looms like the sword of the Damocles. We have a climate. We have a crisis of conflicts. Over 80 conflicts going on all across the world. What do you think can happen? What can we do? What do we? The Secretary General has been trying very hard with the Summit of the Future. Now we have a Pact of the Future. What do you think? And you know, you come from Norway, a very important member state to the multilateral system, a country that has stood with stoic resilience to advancing multilateralism. And I'm pleased to serve here as the UN resident coordinator in China, where the country really is very much in favor of multilateralism. What is it that could happen that could get multilateralism back on track? Because I think there is a breakdown of global solidarity as well.
I think we need a somewhat deeper analysis, and multilateralism is in crisis for a reason. And the main reason is that we are moving into a future which is very different from the past. Look, the United Nations was mainly started by one man, and that is Franklin Delano Roosevelt,
True.
a very visionary president of the United States of America during the Second World War, deep into the US struggle against Nazism in Germany and against the Japanese aggression. Well, they put good people to plan for the future, and they invented the United Nations, and many nations joined it. That was absolutely brilliant. But the UN has not changed our time. We are in a completely different time now. Look on the Security Council, two relatively small European powers, France and the United Kingdom, are there. India, the largest nation in the world with population, the third largest economy in the world in purchasing power capacity, and for sure one of the major powers in the future, is not there. But nor is Africa, nor and medium-sized, very important nations in the global south, Indonesia, Brazil, Turkey, Nigeria, I can mention more, South Africa, they don't have a say. And of course they demand a say in the new world.
Indeed.
And the UN is kind of frozen in the old structure and added in the old culture. It's not embracing the new world, but stuck to the old. So we need to reform the UN and the system for it to work. And I'm largely optimistic because the future is much fairer. Look, in the 19th century, two of a few colonial powers were dominating the world. China was humiliated. Africa and India was colonialized. That was not a fair and good world. It was somewhat stable, but not fair. Then the 20th century was dominated by one power, the United States of America. There were some benefits to that, but it was also not fair to the world. And now in the 21st century, yes, the United States and China will be the two main powers, but India, Europe, and all these other global south powers will always also be there. It will give more room for maneuver for different nations to represent their interests and their core demands. Yeah. But we need a rules-based order underpinning it all, and we can talk about what such a rules-based order would imply.
Yeah. No, absolutely, Eric. And I think that is why, you know, I'm hoping that as we mark this year's 80th birthday of the United Nations, there are many events which are taking place. We are planning some events here as well in China. What do you think can really be done, as the Secretary General is trying very hard for the implementation of the Pact of the Future? We need the P5 membership to really give velocity to it. Your views, you're in Europe, you're seeing the entire ecosystem unravel there, how an entire new European Union could actually become a juxtaposition to advancing the multilateral system. Your view, what could the US and China be doing now?
Look, the US-China relationship is the most fundamental of all relationships, because these are the two only nations with a global leadership role. I mean, yes, the United States may be dominant in military terms, but China is probably more important than the United States in economic terms. Vast majority of the nations in the world have China as the main trade partner. So these are the two major nations. But India, Europe, others are also important. US and China must respect each other. They should look for every area where there is agreement.
Yeah.
There are many areas. I mean, President Trump wants to serve the people in the kind of forgotten America. The people in Kansas, in Dakota, in Oklahoma, the people are not in the front line of global news. And he wants to bring economic and other benefits to them. China can help.
Yeah.
China can do its utmost to make sure that there is no opioids coming from China to the United States, and it can help Trump making systems where these areas can also benefit from in economic terms. But of course, the opposite is also the case. The United States of America must respect China.
True.
The United States of America, deep down, have a difficulty with the fact that there are two equal powers in the world. They're used to dominate the world, and not we Americans, but we Westerners have a kind of moralist syndrome where we believe that others should be like us. And China will never be like the United States of America.
Yeah.
So base the future on respect and mutual interest.
Yeah.
And there are many areas in history where big powers kept peace for a long time. I mean, a famous example in China is where the Song and the Liao dynasties, they were probably the two most powerful nations in the world at the time. And Song, for sure, was by far the most important nation in the world in the thousands. And Liao was probably the second. They had 100 years of peace. They didn't love each other, but had peace with each other. There's no need for China to love the United States or vice versa, but to look for common interest and respect.
Yeah. True. So, Eric, I believe that China and the US, if they were to come together, and I tell this to many of the African ambassadors, when you look at forums like the Forum for China-Africa Cooperation, I believe that they could launch a new Marshall Plan together, which can completely transform Africa, because that is where you'll have a population of about 2.5 billion people by 2050, of which 900 million people will be young people. And if we're there to make the investments now, the return of that investment will be manifold, So I hope that we will see more convergences between them, when it comes to common issues. And I think Africa's development is going to benefit both China and the US and the rest of the world. So I mean, I could imagine a Marshall Plan where we actually have the EU, we have China, we have the US, we have the ASEAN countries all coming together in this transformative state. I think massive changes and massive opportunities actually lie there.
This is so important. China, I want to applaud. China made a fantastic step 2-3 weeks ago in Changsha at Africa-China Summit, where China said all African nations are now welcome to export to China without
tariffs.
levies.
I think that's a remarkable statement.
That's absolutely remarkable. And Europe and America and others should do the same. Look, no African nation want to choose between China and the United States. All of them want to be friendly to both the United States and China. If the United States has some complaints about Chinese trade with Africa, well, my answer to them is, well, you do better. Give a better offer to Africa. If African nations get an offer from both China and the United States to send their students to Tsinghua and Harvard to trade with China and the United States,
why not?
To have people-to-people relations with both China and the United States, that's what every leader and every citizen of Africa want. They love it. And as you said, Africa by 2050 will have double the population of China. Until recently, it was basically the same. It will be
double.
It will be double. Africa can either be a great partner, a great market, a great exporter to us. We can benefit from tourism and friendliness and economic development in Africa, or it can go into civil wars and terrorism, where there will be export of people, terrorism and extremism will come to the rest of the world, which is not just dangerous for Africa, dangerous for all of us.
Absolutely.
So let's choose together the positive way.
And not to forget the rapidly aging population in Europe and China and the ASEAN countries, America. So yes, I think there are plenty of win-win opportunities.
Africa is basically the only place in the world where there is rapid population growth.
True. So Eric, I recall, and one of the challenges that Africa and many other parts of the world facing is extreme desertification and rapid desertification. And you introduced me to the Kubuchi project in Inner Mongolia, and the first time I actually took the Deputy Secretary General of the UN, Amina Mohammed, to visit. That particular project completely blew my mind. I have never seen anything like that. I mean, it's a poster child of success in combating desertification, which the world has been trying different things, where we've seen the convergence of big data technology and innovation happen there. Do you think this model could really get adopted to other parts of the world which are grappling with these challenges?
Absolutely. I mean, like other nations cannot copy China. No one can copy Kubuchi, but there is a lot to be learned from Kubuchi. Kubuchi is the most successful greening of a desert anywhere in the world. Why was it so successful? Because the pioneers there, led by a person called Wong Wenbiao, they saw the desert as an opportunity, not a threat. And they looked into what kind of businesses can we do which will green the desert, but will also provide better livelihood for us at the time, because they were very poor. Now they're affluent in Kubuchi.
Their per capita GDP is higher than the national average.
Exactly. But back in the days, in the 1980s, they were dirt poor.
Of course.
And the desert provided huge sand and dust storm to Beijing and other areas. Well, what did they do? Look for plants which can thrive in very dry circumstances. Look for ecotourism. Look for solar panels and renewables, and look for all these economic opportunities which can make tree planting and greening possible. And now it's a fantastic success story, because if you go to Africa or to the Middle East, I mean, they cannot copy every plant or everything that did that, but they can copy the spirit and the ambitions. And I think we should really form some global alliance where others can learn from Kubuchi. There are other success stories in China also, in other parts of Inner Mongolia or Gansu and Xinjiang, but China has so much to provide. Also in these modern times, of course, technology, like you can plant with drones, you can plant with different machineries. In the old days, it was very, very, very labor intensive. Ladies, they were planting one after the other, quite boring, but providing a fantastic development. But now we can do it much faster and more technological.
So I've been actually encouraging a lot of the African ambassadors, particularly the African ambassadors, to go visit it. In fact, I'm going there on the 15th of July with Jeffrey Sachs, with climate envoy Liu Jianmin, and a few others, to just go there and take a look at it. I think it's one of the most successful models, also a public-private partnership. So I see the potential of this can be massive. So Eric, we are seeing that in many parts of the world, there are issues of hostility, of belligerence. And, at an earlier stage of your career, you decided to devote yourself to try and make peace between different opposing parties, and one of them was Sri Lanka. What drove you towards it, and how did it all come about?
I think at the end of the day, peace is the most important of all, because if there is a gang of armed people up in the mountains there coming down to rape your daughter or kill yourself, that will be the only thing you're thinking of. Destroys people's life, but it also distracts political leaders in the world to focus on the conflicts rather than long-term development. So it's so important. Most important is to avoid conflicts. Because normally those who start a conflict believe it will be short and sweet and I will win. Normally it becomes much, much more protracted and very difficult to end. I can give you any number of examples of people who thought the war will be short, but it was very long. I mean, Sri Lanka is a clear example. I'm very sure that the Tamil rebels who started the war had no idea that it will take 30 years, that they and all the families would be killed at the end, and that it would be a complete disaster for Sri Lanka. But the same happens in so many other wars.
True.
So let's stop the war. When a war is started, let's always look for compromise. There's no way you can solve a war without compromise. I mean, ending the war in Ukraine will imply compromises, maybe on the part of Ukraine, even hard compromises, because they're not what you really wanted.
True.
But it's better to avoid the war. War in the Middle East can only be ended when there is a Palestinian and a Jewish Israeli state. Cannot be one by one wiping out the other, and then you need compromise. And you should restore the word compromise as a great word. Look, if you try to, even the smallest unit, if you try to run your family without compromise, you decide everything. I mean, you decide what you will have for dinner, what you will entertainment you will have, what you will do, everything. I mean, I should tell you, your wife and children will divorce you tomorrow. There must be compromise in the family, in the sports club, in a nation, and in the global community.
I think we need a surge in more solidarity and perhaps more compassion, Eric. I think we are getting so desensitized to conflicts and disasters, etc. We switch through TV screens and we forget that there are multiple events that are happening which are causing loss of lives and livelihoods.
Absolutely true, but let's also not forget that the vast majority of the people of the world are living in peace and have the opportunity to move. The two largest nations in the world, China and India, they are living in peace. That's nearly 40% of humanity. If you add Indonesia, it is 40% of humanity. And there's a rapid economic development in these parts of the world. Basically, Asia is at peace. Conflicts are in Africa and Europe and Middle East.
True. Actually, as a matter of fact, if you take from Afghanistan, Pakistan, all the way to the Asia Pacific, I mean, the small island states, you're talking about half the world's population is here, 4 billion of the 8 billion, the rest of the 4 billion, and it's quite fascinating how Asia can be. I completely agree. The prospects of Asia's growth, it will really give velocity to the new global economy, without a doubt, simply also because of a youngish population.
This is also the genius of the great Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping. Look, when he came in, before he came into power, most of the war that's in the world were in East Asia. After that, there's hardly been anyone perishing in any war in East Asia. China has not been involved in any war since 1979, when the United States of America unfortunately been in basically every war since. So this was also a deliberate political decision by Deng and other leaders. We want to develop our land. And if we want to develop China, we don't have time for all these conflicts.
Well, and that's why I think the Secretary General is trying hard to resurrect the UN Charter. We, the people, will end the scourge of war, and I just hope that we can achieve that direction. Eric, as we are about to come to the last phase of our discussion, young people in China are quite fascinating people. They're very entrepreneurial. They've got a lot of energy, gusto, highly educated. I think the investments that happened here in human capital is just pretty remarkable. I mean, I can tell you that of all the national staff that I've dealt with in my 29-year career, this is where they are really at the best. You remain passionate about the climate agenda. You talk about climate issues in India, you talk about climate issues in China, you talk about climate issues all over the world. What is a message you want to send across to the young people of China in order to advance the climate agenda?
You must engage. Use the social media platforms. I mean, I've never met a young Chinese which is not on any number of social media platforms. Showcase the good developments. Showcase what you are doing, but also what your friends or the government, someone else is doing. If you see some good examples from India or United States, showcase that. Plant trees. Avoid plastics. Why can't we drink from normal cups? Take these small steps in your life which showcase to the world the enormous potential for a greener China. And China is now going green at a speed which is absolutely astonishing. I mean, give you a couple of examples. I was just in Zhejiang province. Back in the days, the rivers in Zhejiang were called soya sauce rivers. Why? Not because they tasted nice like soya sauce, because they were black and brown from from pollution.
Yeah.
Now you can put your head down, you can drink from it.
Yeah.
There are any number of birds and butterflies and fish. You can bathe. It's absolutely wonderful. This is, of course, a deliberate decision by the province of Zhejiang to make it happen. Or then I went to Chengdu. Chengdu is one of the greenest cities in the world.
Yeah.
They now are making a bike and pathway which is 20,000 kilometers long. I was running, jogging on this, of course not 20,000 kilometers, but a small part. But how much is 20,000 kilometers? Well, that's from east to west in America, or east to west in China 4 times.
Wow.
In the bike and pathway through forests, through parks. It's absolutely green, and of course creating a very, very, very people-friendly city.
Right. Wow. I have to go back to
You
Chengdu to
must
see
go to
this.
Chengdu, yeah.
I've been there twice, but I have to go back to see this. That's
I
fascinating.
don't want to be rude to other Chinese cities because there's so much happening in Shenzhen or Hangzhou or Suzhou or wherever, but Chengdu is absolutely remarkable.
Well, take Beijing itself,
Yeah, exactly.
one of the most polluted cities in the world at one time.
10 years ago, I never went running in Beijing. Why would I want to inhale all that smoke?
Yeah.
Now I happily do it. The sky is bright, the sun
It's
is
incredible.
shining, and you can inhale any amount of...
But tell me, Eric, which is the point that I make to many of the ambassadors who have come where their cities are highly polluted. Is the Beijing example, can they emulate it?
I think absolutely. Again, I mean, my African other friends all the time ask me, can we learn from China? I tell them, yes, of course you cannot copy the political system of China. That is maybe 2,500 years old. You go back to the Qin and the Han, even early dynasties. It's a very long history of China. That cannot be copied by anyone. But you can learn. What can you learn? A few issues. Number one, political leadership matters a lot.
So
the Chinese
political
political
will, the
leaders
most
have been
important,
so focused on poverty alleviation, and after President Xi came into power, so focused on the environment. You need presidents and prime ministers who give that focus. Then business, I mean, the transformation of China is not done by the political leadership alone. It's, say, the competition between Tongwei and Longyi and Jinko and Trina and all these companies, which has brought down the price of solar energy to 10%.
True.
It's a fantastic, these are heroes of the environment.
Yeah.
They don't get the attention they deserve, but these are business people. And you need to focus on people, education, bringing people into the processes. These things everyone can do. Everyone can clean up the rivers in the way they did in Zhejiang. You cannot do it in one day.
Very true.
But if they are similarly focused as China, it can be done.
Fantastic. Do you have anything else to add, Eric? I mean, just anything.
I'm very concerned with this pessimism about the future, which is so prevalent, particularly in the United States and Europe. We need to bring optimism. When I go to India, there's basically only optimism. People see enormous opportunities. China also, it's mainly optimism. Let's bring that positive attitude to the world. We humans have handled many difficult challenges in the past.
True.
So let's look into and China has solved so many issues in the last decades, but so have the world. And let's see how we can do even better in the future. But then we need to keep peace. And we need to keep our minds focused on the major issues, which is that everyone must get out of poverty and get opportunities in life. And we need to be much, much more careful when we treat Mother Earth.
True. So more optimism, more solidarity, and perhaps a little more compassion.
Absolutely.
Eric, thank you very much. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.